Hello viewer, a warm welcome to Elimu TV where you watch and learn. This is Geography Form 3. Our topic will be Statistical Presentation and Analysis of Lesson 1, Cumulative Bar Graph. I am your teacher, Madam Abigail Rachel. Our subtopic is Compound / Cumulative Bar Graph. A cumulative bar graph comes from the word cumulate. To accumulate something, you put something you make something accumulate on top of another thing. That is, you put something in addition to something else. For us to draw a bar graph, we need figures that we will be able to work out and calculate. Then later on, fill in the digits in the correct bar graph. So our data is on major cash crops reported in Kenya, and this data is in terms of tons. So we have our crop, that is coffee, tea, maize, and wheat. We have our years, 1990, 1991, 1992, 1993, and 1994. So for coffee, in 1990, it was 4,500, tea, 1,300, maize, 800, wheat, 600. In 1991, it was 5,000. Tea 1,100, maize 900, wheat 500. In 1992, coffee was 5,200, tea was 2,500, maize was 500, wheat was 600. In 1993, coffee is 6,000, tea is 2,100, maize is 400, wheat is 500. In 1994, coffee is 5,900, tea is 2,200, maize is 400, wheat is 500. So this is the data that we require for us to make a cumulative bar graph. We will look at the steps for drawing a cumulative bar graph. Step number 1, which will be to set cumulative totals for the data each year. Let's look on the second slide so that we can see how you compute that. So how to calculate the cumulative total for each data. Our example will be on year 1990. And here we will add 4,500 plus 1,300 to get 5,800. 5,800 plus 800 to get 6,600. 6,600 plus 600 to get 7,200. On our figure on the left, using our example of 1990, so we took 4,500. That was the first digit of coffee. So this 4,500 on the cumulative part of the diagram, we will put it as the first digit. So 4,500 plus 1,300 we will get 5,800. 5,800 plus 800 we get 6,600. 6,600 plus 600 we get 7,200. So this is the cumulative data. This is the cumulative total for year 1990. Our second step will be to draw a vertical axis y to represent the dependent variable. So a vertical axis is a line that is upright, and you should label it y-axis. And on the labeling it, you make it horizontal as the line is. Don't make it to look vertical. You should make it to look, you should label your y-axis in a vertical way as the line is, not as horizontal as I have done. Step number 3, you draw the horizontal axis to represent the independent variable. So what we label our line in this step is the x-axis, and the x-axis contains the years according to our diagram. So labeling it will enable for easy computation of the data that we are going to compile to form a graph. Our step number 4 will be to label both axes using a suitable scale. And how we will compute for a suitable scale, on our x-axis, we will label it the years according to our data that we have seen in our first slide. Then on the y-axis, you will label it in terms of centimeters or tons or kgs, depending on the data that you have been given. So on our image, we have 0 tons, 2 tons, 4 tons, 6 tons, 8 tons, 10 tons, up to 12 tons. This is how we will label our diagram using a suitable axis. Then we have our diagram here. So this is what I calculated and found that it has worked for us. So plotting the cumulative value for each year, we have in 1990, where we have the blue color and it is wheat. The blue color represents wheat. In all the years, we have 1990, 1991, 1992, 1993, 1994. So they all represent wheat. In 1990, the wheat was around less than 1,000. In 1991, it is also less than 2,000. In 1992, similar, up to 1994. So a cumulative bar graph is computed when you put the different commodities that you have been given on top of each other. We have seen this has worked out when you add the values from the first year or the first crop to the last crop, so that you can find the cumulative totals for the data. Our 8th step will be to use values for components to subdivide the cumulative bar graph. We have seen this in our earlier image of a cumulative bar graph. Our 7th step will be the subdivisions are placed in descending order with the values that we will find at the bottom part of the data when you are combining the cumulative frequencies. Then you should shade each component differently. In our cumulative bar graph, because we are computing different commodities in one graph, you're going to shade each commodity differently, that is each component. For example, here you have coffee that is purple, you have tea that is maroon, maize that is yellow, and wheat that is sky blue in color. Our last step will be to put a title and a key. So after you are done drawing your cumulative bar graph, you are going to put a title and a key. Our title for this graph will be crops grown in Kenya in terms of tons, and our key is what you have put inside, what you have labeled inside the graph, that is the maize, wheat, tea, and coffee. On the y-axis, we are going to label it the export in terms of tons. Here is where you have our tons, 1,000 to 10,000 tons. In our x-axis, we have the years. So this is a proper labeling of a cumulative bar graph. Advantages: it is easy to construct a cumulative bar graph. After you have finished combining the cumulative totals for each year, it is easy to construct. Number 2, it has a very good visual impression. Going back to our last slide, we see that this cumulative bar graph has a very good visual impression. You can be able to tell the tons of coffee that was available in each year. That is the purple part, the part that has been shaded purple. You can be able to tell the amount of tea in each year. You can also be able to tell the amount of maize as well as wheat. Number 3, there is easy comparison for the same component in different bars because of uniform shading. When you shade the different bars, the different components according to their right calculations, it is easy to compare one year to another year. For example, you can say that in 1990, coffee was more produced, or coffee was more sold than in 1992. Number 4, it is easy to interpret bars that are shaded differently. Shading the bars differently enables one to interpret what goes on in one component of the bar, what goes on in the other component of the bar. So you can say it is easy to interpret. For example, in 1990, coffee was below 2000. It is easy to give a certain digit to a certain crop. The fifth advantage is that the total value of the bar can be identified easily. Here is when you have finished calculating the cumulative totals for the crops in a certain year, you can be able to identify where the bar has reached. This is by you do this by drawing the bar graph up to the total digit that you have reached for cumulative totals. Disadvantages: it does not show the trends of components that changes over time. For example, if today we record maize as having been in some kgs, let's say 50 kgs, if the maize continues to improve later on after you have done recording and you have computed our graph, it will not show this trend. So a cumulative bar graph only shows what has been presented at that particular time. Second disadvantage: it cannot be used to show many components as there is limited space upward. So for cumulative bar graph, you have seen that we compute our components going upwards in a descending order. So most of the time we compute our bar graph on a piece of paper or even on a slide in a computer. So you see that the space is limited. We cannot be able to show a variety of components. That disadvantage: it is tedious as there is a lot of calculation work involved. For you to draw cumulative bar graph, you have to do a lot of calculation, that is finding the cumulative totals for each year. Number two, you have to choose a suitable scale that will enable you to draw and compute this graph. So we can see that this takes a lot of time and one becomes very tired. To continue with the disadvantage, it is not easy to trace individual contribution made by members of the same bag. So for the crops that we collect in terms of kgs, in terms of tons, we see that we cannot be able to know how much each farmer contributed, because if we are computing data for maize, we will only be able to we do it on a collective basis, that is on a general basis. How many bags of maize have we gotten, or how many bags of maize have been harvested at a particular time? It's not what an individual brought to the ground. The fifth disadvantage is that poor choice of vertical scale can cause exaggeration of bar's length, leading to wrong conclusions. So if you exaggerate your vertical scale, that is the y-axis, you put numbers that have a very big difference in them. You see that this vertical scale will ruin the computation of the bar graph, and this will lead to exaggeration. We have come to the end of our lesson, and here is an assignment for you. What are the advantages and disadvantages of a compound cumulative bar graph? I'll also urge you to find some data that you can compute and draw a cumulative bar graph at your own time. Thank you for learning and watching with Elimu TV. I am your teacher, Madam Abigail. SMS us on 4007, tweet us at Elimu TV _KE, and our Facebook page is Elimu TV.